The long-awaited Path of Exile 2 has launched in early access. Those who purchased their way in with an early access pack, or have been granted early entry for some other reason, can play Grinding Gear Games' newest ARPG. NVidia is ready to go with access to Path of Exile 2 on GeForce Now. How well does it perform on the various levels of NVIDIA hardware? Let's cut to the chase. Path of Exile 2 is a bit different from its forebear. It's newer with way less features, options, and baggage. The skill and equipment system is less convoluted, and it makes for an easier time for new players to figure out the complicated relationships between gear, spells, and your character's skill tree. Skills are more interactive with one another. They require a bit more strategy when you're looking to get the most out of your attacks, and bosses are much more of an event, each with some kind of gimmick or strategy you should be mindful of to succeed. I'm enjoying it. The tempo's a bit slower than its predecessor. The game feels less like a rush to the end of the story, but that's to be expected since it's new and not the same Path of Exile we've been playing for the last 11 years. If you like the sound of that, early access has been fun, especially figuring things out with friends. I'd recommend checking it out, especially once it's truly free to play and out of early access. Once we get into the performance on cloud, there is a setting I would like to leave on, especially with a new game like this. It's called Dynamic Resolution. This allows the game to scale down and keep playing more smoothly when there's a lot of action and effects on screen. In a game like this, your success is going to be dependent on your ability to play and react without hardware-related slowdown. During testing, I'll disable this at times so you can get a better idea of what the hardware can really do. But if you leave it on, you're going to have a much better performance, even if your visuals suffer temporarily. Allowing the game to regulate itself will give you a better experience. Now, eventually Path of Exile 2 will be free to play, so let's take a look at its performance on NVIDIA's free tier. To be honest, I had a terrible time with free tier. I don't usually bother reviewing it, but it's a long way from the days when it had a similar performance to the priority tier. This basic rig, as NVIDIA calls it, is certainly living up to the term basic. It's free, so it's hard to complain, but let me get into it. I made the mistake of trying to play on a Saturday. The queue to get in took an entire hour. Then, after getting a rig, this happened. And the queue starts all over again. As you can imagine, I wasn't pleased. I decided to wait until 1 a.m. to give it another go. I sat through the commercials, including this one for GeForce Now. Wow, guys, really hitting the target audience here. And after about 35 minutes, I was in. Free tier is on a 1920 by 1080 resolution. We're aiming for that cap of 60 frames per second. The most demanding part of this game is going to be sitting in town. This is where everyone else's characters are sitting around with their glowing microtransaction outfits and outrageous special effects and silly pets. Not my thing. Wish I had a hideout to chill in. But once you're actually fighting things out in the world, things do improve a bit. We can still hit our target FPS when things are quiet. Free tier had another big issue that caused me to have to reload it to fix. It's hard to say if this is a problem with NVIDIA or with Path of Exile 2, but I only encountered this on the free tier. As you can see, things aren't exactly working right. Free tier is playable. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is free, and it works most of the time. You're going to have issues, but if you'd rather have some issues than not play at all, go for it. Let's move on to something better. We're leaving the free tier behind along with any and all lag and control issues. Performance allows for a 1440 resolution, and we'll try that out. It's almost double the pixel count of a 1920 by 1080, so if you're playing on a standard HD monitor, expect better performance if you get the same hardware. We're aiming for the 60 FPS cap on performance. We've had no latency issues, control is responsive, no more frame drops, no more issues of any kind really. It's a completely different experience from the free tier. Our frame rate is consistently near 60 frames per second in normal situations, with some minor drops, particularly during heated action. As usual, it also drops in town, with all the special effects flying off the other players. To be sure, we're going to try 1920 by 1080 on performance. And we have no issues. Performance is actually similar to the 1440 resolution. We were given a 2080 instead of a 3060 this time, and we're still getting some wild frame rates in town, but a stable 50 plus rate in battle, usually around 60. Something I experienced while adjusting resolution in Path of Exile 2 on GeForce Now. The cursor does not always reflect the correct position if the game resolution doesn't match GeForce Now's resolution. This isn't usually going to be a problem because most people aren't adjusting their display like I am for testing, but you should be aware of it in case there's an initial mismatch. Once you get the resolutions to match, mouse control returns to normal, no problems. Since I can, let's check the widescreen functionality of the performance tier. Resolution is going to be 2560 by 1080 pixels. We're getting a 3060 again, so the pattern seems to favor 3060s for any resolution greater than 1920 by 1080. Again, we're having no issues with FPS drops. Town's a bit dicey, but we're keeping near 60 for all relevant gameplay. Doubly so if you keep that dynamic resolution option on. Very similar functionality and performance to the 1440 resolution. Controls are never really an issue after the free tier, so suffice it to say that now and through the ultimate tier testing, everything is quick and responsive. Time to move on to the big guns. Ultimate's a different beast. We're jumping right into 4K. 60 FPS is lovely, but now we can hit 120, and we hit it a lot. Battles drop us as low as 80 frames per second, and we're often riding at 100 to 110. With 4 times the pixels of a 1080 resolution, and over double that of 1440 resolutions, we're still never dipping under that 60 FPS goal of those previous tiers, even in the dreaded environment called Town. Is it perfect? No. But is it worlds better than what we've seen so far? Absolutely. The game is smooth, it plays incredibly well. There is room for improvement towards that 120 FPS cap, but we are having the best experience so far. Finally, let's touch on the ultimate widescreen. This is a 21:9 ratio. We've got 3440 by 1440 pixels and 120 FPS cap. We're given a 4080 and we're getting a lot of the same performance as we did in the 4K resolution. Even though there are less pixels on screen at a roughly 5:8 ratio compared to 4K, a lot more of the battlefield is visible, so we're always going to see a bit further and render more stuff at once. We're just zoomed out further. It plays well, it looks great. Other features worth testing: everything in Path of Exile 2 runs server-side, from the game's saves to the world you play in, to the multiplayer hookups. This means there's no need to check for cloud saves, no need for concern with multiplayer functionality. Here I am playing with one of my best buds to test out multiplayer. There's no issues at all. We team up, we take out a boss that was giving him a bit of trouble, and we move on. One more thing to mention. When I was playing off the cloud locally, I was having some issues with my connection to the Path of Exile servers. The unstable connection was giving me control problems and causing an unpleasant game experience. I couldn't resolve it, and I just hopped back on GeForce Now. I had a stable connection to them, and they had a good connection to the GGG servers, and I was able to continue playing with my pal. It's just a funny workaround when cloud solved a local connection issue. The verdict is recommended for any paid tier. It's playable, but not recommended on the free tier. The free tier was barely getting the job done, sometimes failing at basic functions. We had crashes, latency issues, visual issues, and that timer bearing down on us. Honestly, NVidia is not showing an honest view of their product with the free tier. If I had no experience with their cloud service and tried out PoE 2 on the free tier just to see if it was worth paying for, I don't think I'd be willing to pay for this product. NVIDIA needs to be careful about what they're showcasing in that free tier now. Years ago, it was comparable to what you get in Priority, but with a time limit. But now, it's an all-around worst product that might even chase business away. Performance and Ultimate were clean. Latency was low. Path of Exile servers are often in the same city as GeForce Now servers. And I even had a better experience on the cloud than I did locally when my ISP was having issues connecting to the GGG servers. Controls were tight, visuals were great, and the game performed as it was meant to. Outside of the failures of the free tier, GeForce Now has what it takes to deliver a great experience on a brand new game that seems to have all the right ingredients for a solid ARPG. Grinding Gear Games has tons of experience making these types of games, and a new iteration allows them to change a lot of the core mechanics that simply aren't feasible to change in the original Path of Exile. I look forward to the evolution of this game and the endless updates that are a trademark of Grinding Gear Games when it comes to their Path of Exile franchise. If you enjoyed this all-tier overview of Path of Exile 2 on GeForce Now, drop us a like to support the channel. Let me know how your Path of Exile gameplay is going both on and off the cloud. Subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all the latest news, tips, gameplay, and reviews when it comes to streaming games. If you want to go above and beyond, join us as a channel member on YouTube or hit up our Patreon if that's more your thing. Keep it locked right here to the only place you can do battle in gaming heaven, Cloud Gaming Battle. I'm Little Quick. The Path of an Exile is honestly pretty gross.